Hello, everyone. I wanted to record a video for the data storytelling talk that I did in the Women in Tech SEO Festival in 2023. This is as part of my promise to be a little bit more active on YouTube and hopefully make some of the resources and the talks that I have been doing over the past few years a little bit more accessible to the people that weren't part of the conferences or to people that would just prefer to have a visual format for the resources that I'm creating. So without further ado, let's talk about data storytelling. Throughout history and throughout the evolution of people, stories have been the vehicle to bridging gaps between people and to uniting them. We have used stories to better understand the world, to communicate very valuable information, and to also just relate to one another. So stories have the power to help us understand meaningful information, and they also have the power to shape our values, to determine our prejudices, or to influence our desires. We have seen throughout the history of marketing how successful organizations have based their entire marketing strategy on storytelling as opposed to selling the product that they are working on. The problem, however, that I have seen working in agencies for the past 3 years is that we have a lot of data points and we collect a ton of data, but what happens is that we don't really tell good stories in order to help projects move forward. So what I see as both an SEO manager and a data manager is that we have a ton of different ways to tell a particular story to influence the way a project is going to go in the future. But we don't use those different data points cohesively, and we don't incorporate storytelling into the way that we present data. So the problem is that using dashboards and using spreadsheets can only tell you what is happening, but it doesn't actually tell you why things are happening. So it's very important to incorporate storytelling into the data journey that we as SEOs and also as data people have. So what is data storytelling? This is a way of communicating information tailored to a specific audience with a compelling narrative. So there are several different components of data storytelling. The first one is data science, and that refers to knowing how to extract knowledge and insights from data. It also means having the technical skill of combining and manipulating multiple different data sources in order to get the desired look of a particular chart or graph that you want. It is a mix of understanding what are the data points that you need as an analyst or as a consultant in order to tell a cohesive story. Where do you get them from, and how do you extract and manipulate that data in order to present it in the way that moves forward your story. The second component of data storytelling is data visualization, and that means understanding how to best visualize data based on the particular data type, and we're going to touch upon this in a moment. It also means knowing how to help your stakeholders comprehend the high quantities of data collected. So you might be presenting a very complex data set, and you, with your data visualization skills, you should make such choices that it helps your stakeholders to better comprehend the data that you have collected. In other words, the data visualization skills should help stakeholders better understand the data as opposed to confuse them even further. Also, as part of data storytelling, you have narrative skills, and within this particular group of skills, you should be able to convey insights. You should know how to best communicate wins or how to create urgency for particular projects that are not performing as well as you wish. And you should also know how to create product relationships. Within your narrative skills, you should also build the foundation of learning how to demonstrate through data cause and impact relationships and how to best present that to particular stakeholder groups. From the chart that you're seeing from the screen, you can see the different areas, but there's one big circle in the middle. And that's a particular skill that I don't see a lot of people talk about when it comes to data storytelling. And in my practice, this has been building relationships. So within this particular group of skills, I'm talking about understanding your stakeholders, and not just understanding them as the role that they take within the organization, but understanding them as people. Who are they? Do they have children? Do they have dogs, cats? What do they like to do in their free time? What are the different areas of their life that you can relate to? How can you best see them as people, not as just your colleagues? As part of this kind of foundational building exercise with the stakeholders that you work with, you should also try to understand what are their hidden motivations. Why are they doing the things that they're doing? Because there might be some times where you don't understand why things are happening. So coming with the point of view of wanting to relate to someone on a human level might help you understand hidden motivations better, and it might also help you see barriers for particular projects even before they arise. You should also try to understand what success looks like to your stakeholders and also what failure looks like to them. This is going to make your job a lot easier when it comes to creating very impactful data stories. So you might be wondering, where in the typical reporting process should data storytelling fit in? Should you start with your story or should you end with it? So let's think about the typical process of reporting. The first is collecting the data. Then you have analysis when it comes to what happened, how does that relate to the project. Then you have the visualization component. What are the different data points that you want to visualize? What do you want to include in your report and what you want to miss out? And then you have data storytelling. Although this is the last step of the process, data storytelling is arguably the most important aspect of typical reporting, because in that last step, you have all of those different skills on how to build a better cohesive narrative and how to relate whatever happened within the particular project or within your particular campaign or strategy with your stakeholders, their motivations, their KPIs, and so forth. With this, we might want to start talking about how to actually do successful data storytelling. What are the building blocks of it? Now, there are three main components that you need to think about whenever you're creating data stories, and this is the data, the narrative, and the visuals. The data should always be accurate, reliable, and appropriate for generating insight. You shouldn't just pull all of the data points that you have available. You should have a selection process for those particular metrics and dimensions that help you craft a cohesive story, and you should try to always use unsampled data whenever possible. If that is not possible, try to provide alternatives to your data, and always have additional documentation to the report that you are presenting that goes into very detailed questions like what are the different filters that you have applied in order to create this view, how can someone replicate what you have achieved in terms of the charts that they're looking at, and just having supporting documentation for the reports that you are building, whether that's a dashboard, spreadsheet, or any other type of report. And it's also important for the data to be reliable, because if you are not confident in the data that you're presenting, and if what you have built as a data view cannot be replicated easily or reliably, then your stakeholders will not feel confident in the report that you have given as well. And this might become a hindrance to the projects that you are working on. The next component is the narrative. Whenever you are building a narrative for the data that you're presenting, you should try to have a compelling, action-oriented narrative that is aligned with the needs of the project and with the needs of your particular stakeholders. And what this means is that you should not only try to relate to what the stakeholders would want to hear in that particular project, what are the important dimensions of the project for them. It's very important to speak the language that your stakeholders are speaking, and to also provide them sufficient context for them to understand what you're talking about, essentially. And then finally, we have the visuals. So the visuals should assist trend and pattern identification, and they should enable insights that are not easily seen in the raw data. So when it comes to building visuals, I myself have made a lot of mistakes throughout the years, and I think it's very important to know that whenever you're building a dashboard, you should try to choose visuals that are aligned with the data that you are presenting. Are you trying to show a relationship? Are you trying to show what the composition is for a particular dimension? Maybe you want to show a comparison, or maybe you want to show a distribution. For all of these data points, there is a particular chart that you should choose. I think the mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to presenting data and in general building reports and dashboards is that they build the charts and the graphs based on what looks best in terms of their own visual preferences, as opposed to choosing a chart type based on what you want to show, what kind of story you want to tell with that particular metric and dimension. Choose visuals based on the story that you're telling, as opposed to choosing them just because they look good. And I'll be the first one to say that I have made this mistake in the past. Why are all of these three things important? When you only have data and visuals, you can enlighten stakeholders' understanding of the results. If you have the data and the narrative, you can explain the context a little bit better. And if you only have compelling visuals and a narrative, you can very shortly, for the duration of your presentation, engage your audience, but the substance of your presentation is not going to be there. So with those three aspects together, you can evoke change. So in order for you to have data storytelling skills that are able to drive change every time, you need an engaging, eye-opening, and descriptive story. Let's talk about how you can benefit from incorporating data storytelling into your consulting. And that is regardless whether you are doing data consulting, whether you're doing SEO, marketing, or any other type of consulting. When you package up your insights with a data story, you build a bridge for your data to the influential emotional side of the brain. That is a quote by Brent Dykes. And let's unpack that a little bit. There is a theory about the left brain and the right brain, and essentially that the left part of the brain is concerned with making decisions based on logic. It's very much focused on facts. It is making decisions based on plan and organizing things. And it is very much grounded in maths and science and essentially statistics. It prefers non-fictional presentation of information. Now, the right side of the brain, according to this theory, is the emotional side of the brain. It's focused on art and creativity. It's where imagination predominates. It prefers fiction and it enjoys creative storytelling. If you're anything like me, you have a ton of plans about your life, which are focused on little milestones and things that you're doing in your day-to-day, building productive habits and just being better in your day-to-day in general. But if, again, you're anything like me, you've had at least a few times in your life where you've woken up in the middle of the night with dramatic plans about completely revamping and changing your entire life. And I call them plans, but they're very loose plans that cannot be put into action unless your logical brain chimes in the early morning. So if you have ever experienced this kind of dramatic, shift of your focus, of your mindset within your life, you know that the right brain is the actual change maker. So the right brain is the brain that can overthrow all the plans that we typically make and actually evoke change in our lives. And it's the same in business as well. So it is important for us to start creating presentations that speak to that particular aspect of us and our thinking. I do want to go over a few different studies that present a little bit better information about why storytelling is important in business. And the first statistic is about recall of participants in a study on whether they have been presented with a single statistic or whether they remember a particular story that they have been told. So the study demonstrates that only 5% of people remember a single statistics versus 63% remember a story whenever it has been told as part of that particular study. So what this means is that you can make your reports memorable when you use storytelling for the data that you are presenting. Another study looked into donation requests, and whenever donation requests were made with statistics as the main argument, or whether they were made with storytelling as the main argument, presenting the stories of particular people that are the best representation of the people that need those particular donations. And what the study demonstrated is that on average, the donation that people would give for a user that is just looking at stats would be $1.14, and it would more than double for a person that is being compelled to donate through a story. What this means is that you can make your arguments more persuasive when you are using storytelling. The third study demonstrates that people, whenever you are telling a story about what has happened for your particular project, they're less likely to be critical, they're less likely to be skeptical of what you're presenting, they're less likely to interrupt or nitpick on particular details. They just want to be taken on a journey and see where this presentation gets to. With data storytelling, you can enjoy a less critical, engaged audience, and you can benefit from that when it comes to your presentations. Let's talk about how you can set up your data stories with the use of storytelling elements. So when it comes to building your narrative, there are three main components that you need to think about. You have the setup, the conflict, and the resolution. According to Harvard Business Review, the setup is the reality, a situation which can be fictional, but oftentimes when we are doing consulting, it is an actual situation. It's essentially the reality that is created for that particular story. The conflict is the event that changes this reality. Without this particular element, we couldn't possibly do storytelling. So when we look at an example from organic marketing, for instance, a conflict could be an algorithm update. A conflict could be a web developer quitting the web dev team and tickets being piled up. Things like that could be presented as conflicts in your particular data story. And then you have the resolution. This is the new reality that this particular conflict creates. What are the practical ways that you can use all three elements to your data storytelling? Let's consider each data point a character in a story, or otherwise a protagonist with each with their own story to tell. The first thing that you should think about is using storytelling to incentivize decision making. So let's look at an example from a wonderful video that I found that I will link above. You can see on the left-hand side a ticket trend graph that shows the number of tickets that were received versus the number of tickets that were processed. The first thing that we're noticing is that it's very hard for us to understand exactly what this chart is meant to show. We can see that it's definitely showing something. There are differences in terms of how they're processed, but it's very hard to understand exactly what the conflict is. It's very hard to also understand what the particular request and ask is from this particular data being presented. In the after image, we can see that the same data is presented in a different way. So there are several different things happening through the months of January to May. We have a very consistent stream of tickets being processed versus tickets being received. And since May, something has happened, and we actually see an annotation of what has happened for this event to change. So the number of tickets that we have received are no longer the same as the tickets that are processed. And we can see the difference very clearly within the chart. And the title of the chart is also changed to allow for the reader to better comprehend exactly what is happening and what the ask is and what are the desired next steps from their point of view as a stakeholder. What we see here is, first of all, we have the setup, we have the conflict, and we also have the resolution all within the same chart. So this is a way that you can revamp the reports that you're currently doing in order to incentivize decision making within your organization. The next thing that you should think about when you are creating data stories is how to emphasize conflict points. So let's look at this particular example. And this is a very rudimentary kind of graph about organic performance on a particular website. So we can see organic performance overall, and we can see sessions from social channels, from referral channels, and organic sessions. And we can see that there are several different conflict points within the organic chart. Something happened within those months to drive traffic to the website. And although we can see that the blog posts are the cause for organic traffic, we can see the templates and resources that are created are actually the ones generating viral moments for referral traffic and also for social traffic as well. Knowing this from the data as analysts, we can then create multiple stories. It is the same data that we're talking about, but if we are speaking to different stakeholders, different teams, or if we have different KPIs and goals, there are different stories that can emerge. So let's take the example on the left side where your stakeholder wants to pursue brand development and brand awareness. From the data that we can see, we know that we can pursue a value-based approach for users through building loyalty. We can make the argument that resources create social mentions, resources lead to more links, and resources are the reason that the site has achieved some sort of virality and brand awareness. Now, if we look from another point of view, a client that wants to pursue traffic as a goal and a KPI, we can then make, using the same data, the argument that blog posts lead to more traffic overall. This means that traffic can over time convert, but not necessarily, and this is a limitation that we have to highlight to that particular stakeholder. We can say to them that we have many new users, but they're often not repeat users, or they're not sharing the content as intended. This might mean that the current content that we have on the site performs well, but might be too top of funnel for the users that we want to acquire as customers. And based on these particular stories that we're telling, we can see that we can propose different actions despite us working with the same data. Depending on the goals, the KPIs, and the person that we're speaking to, we can suggest different actions in terms of the strategy. So from one point of view, we might want to suggest for the stakeholder that wants to pursue a brand-based approach that we might want to do on-page enhancements for resource pages to allow them to attract more traffic organically. Or we might want to make further investments in resources and perhaps even gate some of the content in order to start generating leads. We might also want to start invest in new authority programs in order to capitalize on the resources that we already have and generate more links. From another point of view, for the other type of stakeholder that wants to pursue organic traffic as a KPI, we might want to say, let's pursue a very aggressive traffic KPI. Let's improve lead generation in blogs. We might even want to pivot to a blog content strategy, creating more blogs, creating more resources, creating resources for different stages of the funnel as opposed to only targeting top of funnel content. It's also important to think about how you're going to tie the story with the projects that you're working on. And let me ask you this. If you are working in consulting, how many times have you been in the situation where your client is saying at the end of the quarter, we didn't hit our goals, and you are sitting there trying to make the argument that absolutely nothing was implemented and this is why the goals were not hit. You are sitting with a ton of resources, strategies, audits, and analysis done for that particular client. You are sitting on a ton of recommendations, but nothing has been implemented, and you are just slowly observing traffic going down. On this point, Aleda, last year at the Women in Tech SEO Fest in 2022, she presented a very good approach to do regular reporting and storytelling on specifically using the setup, conflict, and resolution framework. What happened, why did it happen, and how to best proceed. The only thing that I have to add to this particular framework is that this should be a regular event, and you should, as a consultant, increase the drama if needed be. Don't wait to have this conversation only in QBRs or yearly reviews, because if you do, you are put in a position where you have to defend the lack of results as opposed to you leading proactively the resolution and finding solutions and ways to have your recommendations implemented. The last thing that I want to point out here is that you should adapt the story to the stakeholders that you're reporting into to help them understand what is happening based on their level of understanding for the particular project and to help them actually make decisions and drive change. And what do I mean by this? Let's suppose that you are sitting in a room with a C-suite and with a project lead or specialist, and you are giving a performance report for the work that you are doing as a consultancy. The C-suite in this particular instance doesn't use technical terminology. They don't really care about things like position tracking. If we're talking about organic traffic, they actually care about user experience, profitability, and growth. If you look at the project lead on the other side, they are intimately involved in the day-to-day. They require to hear for particular projects that you're proposing or changes that you're discussing. They need to know how things are going to be implemented. They need to know with a level of detail, clarity, and particular technical requirements that the C-suite doesn't really care about. So what often happens is that if you present the same story to both of them, at least one of them is going to feel like they're not really part of this conversation. At least one of them is going to feel that this is a waste of their time in terms of the meeting. So you need to understand that when you're talking to C-suite, you have to present a story in a way that emphasizes the conflicts that you're currently having in order to enable them to resolve bottlenecks, because they would typically have the authority to resolve any issues that are outside of this particular project. So if you need, let's say, developer support and you're not getting it for the past 6 months and nothing has been implemented because of that, the C-suite is the person that you should highlight this particular story to in order to help them resolve the bottlenecks that you're having. But on the other hand, you should not exclude the project lead or specialist that you're talking to, because they're actually going to be the person that's going to get the work done. So what might happen is that in a particular presentation, you might present a particular data point in a way that is speaking in two different languages or saying the same thing twice, only to ensure that it is heard by the particular stakeholder and understood in the correct way. And there is one more thing that I want to say when it comes to reporting to C-suite versus reporting to project leads or specialist. Despite what you might be led to believe that dashboards or business intelligence reports or complex spreadsheets or anything that is very fancy, shiny, looks good, interactive, you might be led to believe that this is the best way to report in general, and you might work with a single approach. But oftentimes, once you come to the understanding and the particular limitation that C-suite has versus project leads or specialists, you might see that you don't have to use something very fancy in order to get your point across. As soon as you know what your ask is, what is the conflict that you're having in terms of the projects that you're leading, and what is the data to support this particular story and the action that you need, it might be as simple as a color-coded table showing a decline, or an implementation catalog with everything in red because there are no resources to drive the implementation. You don't have to present things in a complex way in order to drive implementation. So try to find the best way to present information in order to actually help with decision making and to actually be very clear on what the ask is. So let's summarize why you should start using a data storytelling approach. First of all, with data storytelling, you can create a bigger impact. By using stories, you can improve the memorability and the persuasiveness of your reports, and you can also create a bigger impact with the data that you are presenting within the organization that you're working with. The next thing is that through data storytelling, you can level up as a consultant. As we have seen, having this particular skill encompasses aspects like data science, visualization, building comprehensive and very compelling narratives, but also working on your stakeholder relationships and also learning how to better communicate with people. The third thing of why it's important for you to start using data storytelling is because through this skill, you can promote change within the organization. You can inform your stakeholders and promote action, create urgency whenever it is needed, but also create a better understanding of the work that you are doing and the impact that it has for the organization. And last but not least, data storytelling can help improve your communication, not only at work, but also outside of work, by using all of the 3 building blocks of data storytelling and the 3 elements of narrative design, the setup, conflict, and resolution. Your suggested course of action can be better understood within the organization and outside of it as well. With all of that said, I want to highlight that I do have a checklist within the description below that you can copy and you can use as a practical guide on implementing data storytelling techniques in your work as a marketing consultant. So I hope this presentation has been useful for you. If you want to contact me for any projects that you're doing, this would be the best way to reach me. And if you've just enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, because I'm building this channel now and I'm hoping to start publishing more videos soon. So definitely stay tuned for that.